everybody, my name's Ashley Stewart from Monash University, all the way from Australia. My talk is on streamlining grants management. So for those of you who were here last year, I spoke about this project when we'd done a lot of work, but it wasn't switched on yet. And as any of you know, when you do some of these big new projects, that designing everything, getting everything ready is only the start, and you can come up against all sorts of interesting scenarios as you roll them out, and then you actually get to reflect on how it all went. So, first I'll provide some background on Monash, so you just know our context, why we wanted this integration, so the background on why we did this in the first place, a bit about how it works, the benefits we've seen in our active funding rounds where we've used this integration, challenges and some of the solutions that we came up with along the way, and where to now, so what we want to do next. So for context, we're a university that is very spread out geographically. We've got campuses in Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and we have research institutes in Italy and China. So we're very spread out, and we use Pure across multiple of these locations. We've got over 95,000 students and 20,000 plus staff, roughly 8,000 researchers. So on the award management front, we process a lot of income, as you can see here. So this is just to give a context of why doing everything manually all the time sometimes caused us some problems. We're active across 200 fields of research, and we've got over 5,600 PhD students alongside our 8,000 plus researchers. So we've had Pure since 2016, so we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary soon. We use Pure as the basis for our promotions, our probations, our public profiles. So we use the portal as well, and it's our source of truth for research information. So we have pictured over here our sort of life cycle of our research projects. So this is going all the way through from finding your funding opportunity, applications, working through ethics, awards to your outputs, and finally the profiles. So here is a sort of bird's eye view of our setup. So we have our funding opportunities into our applications, into our awards, into our projects. So we keep all of these one-to-one-to-one. And we also have our ethical reviews feed in from an integration with Infonetica ERM that we then link up to our applications. So, why did we want an integration for our applications? So we have this particularly large government funder that we get a lot of funding from, and that we have these rounds where we might have to process hundreds of applications in a very short time frame, which is quite stressful for everybody involved, and the university has to sign off on each one of these applications to the funder. And we wanted our researchers to be able to focus on their research and submitting it in the portal where they'll do their final submission and not worry about bringing it back into Pure for all of the administrative processes that we need to do as a university. So we also need to be able to work on up-to-date information though, which is the difficulty in we don't want to be pulling people across multiple systems, people getting confused on where different applications are up to around the place, and having those much dreaded tracking spreadsheets that tend to appear when people are desperately trying to track things across multiple systems. So there can be a lot of these applications, and we just wanted to minimize that administrative burden of keeping track of everything across multiple systems and stop distracting our researchers with those where we can. So this is the workflow between the two systems. So the top is the funder system where our researchers submit. So these pass through multiple different stages. They start in draft. And then once they're submitted to the research office, researchers can't edit them anymore in that system. So while it's sitting in draft, this gets pushed across to Pure and we'll keep updating. So as the researchers are working on their application in this funder system, we're getting all of the information about the project, its description, all the investigators, all the collaborators. They're constantly populating into Pure as this has been worked on hourly. And then once it's submitted to research office in the funder system, this then pushes the application to pre-approval in Pure, which goes to our grants office and it attaches a copy of the application. It then proceeds as it normally would through all of our internal approvals and checks. And then it gets to our stage in Pure where it's ready to submit to the funder. And at this point, the research office go back and certify it. So this part is still a manual last sense check before everything goes in to the funder. And then once they have submitted it to the funder, the integration comes back and populates the details of that submission into Pure. So what date it was submitted, and it takes that final snapshot of the application that was submitted and attaches it to the record, and then it will sit in awaiting reply. So that's our workflow for applications. So the benefits on the application side that we've seen is we've seen improvements in multiple areas, and we wanted to work on our data timeliness, our completeness, and our consistency. Because sometimes some researchers will have very detailed records and some will do the bare minimum to move it along. And we also wanted it to be more automated and set up to be run continuously, saving us time, less data entry, and so we could have better reporting during the round so everyone could see the same information, and better reporting after the round quicker as well. So for those of you who were here last year, I did talk about our first attempt at automating this process was we had some bots that used to run and pull sort of real minimum data across, so maybe sort of like titles and your primary chief investigator and some dates, and that was about it. But at least we knew it existed, so it was a good start. But now the integration, it runs hourly, so it's constantly keeping these up to date and it doesn't require somebody to go look after the bot, which is what we used to have. And this grants a lot of visibility both in the editor for any of our faculty or school staff helping the researchers and for the researchers themselves. Everybody's looking at the same thing. And then we can also report on this through the reporting module in Pure. The faculties can get an overview of how many submissions they've got in that funding round. It also helped cut down on the bots only ran twice a day. So we'd have, researchers starting to get a bit nervous if they hadn't seen their application yet. So that was always a thing back and forth, which we don't have to worry about so much anymore because it's only an hour's wait at most. So on to completeness. So versus our old bots, we got sort of 3 fields across, and then it was up to our researchers to populate everything else, or failing that, our grants office when we went to validate records. But for the integration, we decided to bring across everything that we could from the funder. So this funder would let us bring across this lovely list here with the title, all of our investigators and their roles, so whether they're primary chief investigator or further down the list, all of our collaborative partners, the applied amounts, the full budget comes across as well, along with a PDF of the proposal, the project dates, the deadline. We have the URL back to the record in the funder system if anyone wants to open it and go check and sense check anything. So it's quite a very complete record. So on the screen here, I have an example of one of our test records. So it might be a bit small in here, but we have our title, our description, our ID from the funder, the link to the funding opportunity. You also have our primary chief investigator listed there, the PDF of what the proposal looks like that has the funder reference on it. We also have our submission deadline that populates from the funding opportunity. The life cycle, so our project dates and that link I talked about. So this is obviously a sort of more standard one, and then I have a slightly more complicated one, which is a bit blurred out, because this one was still in progress, but you can see this is what one would look like much further into the round, where you've got multiple different fundings. So this was to show that we can bring in our in-kind and cash contributions from other collaborators that we're working with. And then you can still see we're marked as the lead organisation under collaborative partners, and you can see all of the information that we get without the researcher having to enter any of this into Pure, only in the funder portal where they're submitting. So consistency, our grants office validate records and that they've found they're spending significantly less time correcting data. So they used to have to go in and backfill anything that wasn't quite right, but all of it's coming through well. So the validations are quicker, less errors compared to the source system because we're pulling it directly from the source system, so that's not surprising, but it's always lovely to see. And it's been beneficial in high volume rounds, so those where we've got hundreds of applications, but we've also found in schemes where there's less applications but lots of collaborators involved that are in flux while it's in draft, it's been really great at keeping those up to date and correct as researchers work through this process and making sure we've got the right information. The grants office have found that they're also getting less queries around who's making a record. They've estimated it saves each of their staff members who work in this space a day or fortnight in their high volume schemes, and that they've got better visibility of data and its completeness and pure, so it's a lot easier for them when they're talking to their faculty and school stakeholders to communicate what's happening in the funder system because it's all coming across really quickly. So there's not as much back and forth in tracking spreadsheets. So some of the other benefits that we've found as we've worked through this and had it live for a while is that we still maintained enough flexibility. If we needed to upload extra documents, we still can. So this might be information around career interruptions, for example. Sometimes we might have applications from people who haven't officially started at the university yet, so we can still add sponsors to our records to help manage it in the meantime. And we've got 2 applications in this space. So I mentioned we had the ethics application as well, the ethics integration as well, and the funder integration. We've got both of these feeding in, giving us a sort of broader overview of that whole life cycle. Now, award creation. So what happens when there's outcomes? So I don't have slides for this because it was very, very recent that we got to have some of these outcomes come through. So how did this go? We had one of our major funding rounds come through last week that had over 150 records to process. We did have a slight hiccup in some of our configuration that we had to fix when they were announced, but on the same day that they were announced, we had all of our applications marked successful or unsuccessful as soon as it was available from the funder. And for all of the awards, the award automatically created without our grants office having to go through and manually mark all of these one at a time. And it was basically as soon as the information entered the system is practically instant and then available in reporting. We also had a smaller scheme after the configuration we'd tidied up come through beautifully instantly, just as we had hoped. So on to challenges. So, sometimes it's nice when everything goes smoothly, but there's always a bit of troubleshooting to do. So we used to leave comments on the records with the bot to let people know that it was there, but it wasn't something that was possible in the integration. So we had to work around that. Matching to internal persons is always hard for anybody who's tried to match people across systems. So ORCID is our primary identifier, but depending on the researcher, they may or may not have had this information in both our system and the funder system. We found something that we weren't as aware of, that some of our research support staff well-meaningly were making applications in the funder system on behalf of the real primary chief investigator. So when it got pulled into Pure, it was putting the managing organisational unit as sort of one of our administrative org units rather than the research organisations that have their workflows set up. And we did have a bug. This last bug is actually fixed now. It just wasn't when we wrote these slides. So it uses the application sync, and sometimes records would fall out of synchronization and become editable, but we've actually fixed that one now. So the solutions that we had for some of these is we ended up, it wasn't part of the original plan, but we've got an email that notifies the researchers when their application's been created, so they don't need to come back and ask us, is it there yet, or check the system. It just tells them as soon as it's been created. We're working on improving our ORCID uptake, and the funder themselves has also released their plan to make ORCID more useful in this process, so it should help all of us and have our matching be more reliable. We've also put in a communication strategy with our faculty research managers and making them aware of some of the flow-on consequences if you make these applications on behalf of the researchers, and also how to fix that. And we did fix this last bug. It just ended up being a bug about the PDFs coming from the funder. So that one actually just has been fixed since I wrote these slides back in September. So, where to now? Now that we've had applications and awards all come through from our major funder automatically. The things that we're planning to work on next is tidying up some of those fields that were in the nice to have column. So our field of research classifications, trying to work on encouraging more funders to have these APIs available. So we can do this with more funders, especially our medical research funder. Having similar would be a humongous help. And then once we have the Milestones API, being able to track some of our funder obligations across both systems and pulling back the variations data. So if there's changes in the investigator list, changes in the project and start and end dates, that we can just pull this back from the funder without somebody manually having to go change it after the fact. And then encouraging everybody to use this data more in reporting. So making sure that all of our staff involved in research administration are aware of just how quickly things are available, because they used to sort of wait around for everyone to go through, mark all the awards, but that they can get used to tracking this more in real time rather than going and digging up a tracking sheet or contacting the grants office, that they can go in and view the reporting workspaces that are getting these updates constantly throughout the round.